Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me and Amy and Derek. So today I wanted to share with you the changes that are occurring in long-term care. These announcements were put out at the end of last week, at which time both care centers were in enhanced precautions. As you know, Monday, Care Center 1 came out of enhanced precautions. Care Center 2 continues to be in enhanced precautions, and hopefully we will have the final one result we're waiting for. And so far, everybody else has been negative, and that means we'll be able to lift Care Center 2 as well. We will continue to cohort the residents until we feel it is safe to sort of open up the home. I really do feel that that's the way things are going, especially with all the new directives and changes that the ministry has been literally pouring out to us over the last few days. So what I've tried to do is just summarize the important pieces of information that families need to know. You don't need to be bogged down with the if this, if that, whatever. So, but you know, we can always deal with people on an individual basis if something is not in line with what I'm sharing with you today or what the ministry has said. So the ministry is beginning to ease temporary enhanced measures that were put in place due to the spread of Omicron. So effective Monday, Friday the 7th, the number of designated caregivers per resident has increased to 4. We continue to limit the number of visitors to 2 per resident at a time. So you can have 2 essential caregivers come in at one time and then the other 2 at another time, or a combination of however you would like to do that. But please note that if we do go into an outbreak or are in enhanced measures, the number of essential caregivers to the residents would go down to 1. So they are now allowed to resume social day absences for the residents who have had at least 3 COVID-19 vaccine doses. It is also important that we support the residents. We have to provide them with information so they can ask when they're out if people have a certain dose or not. So this piece of paper here, which will be at the front, would be something we would give to the resident and the family if they were going out for a day social visit. So I want to talk about absences in just in general, and then specifically the day social absence. So absences, there's no change to medical absences or compassionate and palliative absences. And you would find that information in your visitor policy. Our visitor policy has once again been updated, so I will be sending that out. It will change if things change on February the 21st, but we continue to make sure that we keep that up to date. So there are, for short-term day absences, there are absences that you're allowed out 24 hours or equal to 24 hours. And there are 2 types. Essential absences, including going to the grocery store or pharmacy or an outdoor walk. And then there are the social absences. At this time, there are no temporary overnight absences allowed. So isolation and testing requirements for residents when returning from a social day absence. This is important, that you know what your loved one has to go through once you've taken them out for the day or for a coffee, whatever. So all these protocols that I'm going to talk about are dependent on the resident not showing any symptoms. If they were to show symptoms, they would have to receive an immediate PCR test and be isolated to their room pending the results. However, if they do come back and they're not showing symptoms, this is what would happen. Upon return from a day social absence, residents must have a rapid antigen test when they return, and then on day 5, they would have to have a PCR test. They're not required to be isolated unless they have a positive result. So they can come back, have the rapid antigen test, move about the home, and then on day 5 receive a PCR test. So if a resident is out on frequent social day absences, defined as 3 times a week or more, they have to have a PCR test and a rapid antigen test 2 times a week on the same day. So for example, they would, if they were going out on a regular basis, they would receive a PCR and a rapid antigen test on Tuesday and then again on Friday. If a resident has known exposure to a case while on an absence, they will be treated as a high-risk contact and would need to be isolated until a PCR test on day 5 is negative. So what that would mean is the resident would come back and they would be placed into isolation. And then on day 5 of isolation, they would have a PCR test. And when that came back, if it came back negative, they would not need to be in isolation anymore. If it came back positive, then they would be treated as a positive case and have to remain in isolation. There are testing exceptions for recently recovered COVID-19 residents and retesting. We've only had 2 residents in our facility. We have a third because we had someone move in with COVID. So if the situation of COVID continues to improve within the community, the ministry is targeting February 21st, 2022 to open up some more things within the home. So it would resume. General visitors would be allowed to come that are 5 years of age or older who have had 2 COVID-19 vaccine doses. Children under 5 years of age are restricted from entering the home at this time, except for infants who are 12 months or younger. There would be an increase on the limits on the number of visitors, including caregivers, that may visit a resident at one time, and this would be up to 3 visitors per visit per resident. They would also expand social day absences to all residents regardless of their vaccination status. At the moment, for a resident to go out, they must have had 3 vaccines. And on the 21st of February, that would change if things go as they're supposed to. This also would be the time that we would resume social overnight absences for residents who've had at least 3 COVID doses. Social group activities would remain in small groups. If someone goes out on a temporary overnight absences, which would come into effect on February 21st for non-medical reasons, then the returning resident would follow the protocols we have in place for admission. Now, Public Health Unit has now a new algorithm for admissions and transfers. So we would be following their algorithm. The reason that they're doing this is they're trying to reduce the amount of times or the amount of time the residents have to remain in isolation because it is not healthy for them. So what would happen is basically the resident goes out overnight, they come back, the home is not in outbreak, so the home is not an outbreak, and the resident is vaccinated because they're our resident, and they have the 3rd or 4th, and so they're vaccinated, then they would screen and isolate on arrival until negative test from day 5. So basically, if they do go out overnight, when they come back, they are going into isolation and being tested on day 5. If they haven't got all of they're vaccinated and boosted, then they would be in isolation for 10 days. So I think what I wanted to really share with families is thinking about when you take the residents out, whether it's a day or overnight, and then they come back, and if it's a day visit, they're just being PCR antigen tested. Then they go back to their care center, and they're at the dining room with their fellow table mates and the staff. And then if on day 5 they end up being positive, we then run into the issue of all the residents that have been exposed to this particular resident. So I know it's great, and I know the residents really want to go out, and I know you want to take them out, as do I want to take my father out. But we need to be careful and look at where they're going, who they're seeing, who's vaccinated, and who's not. So those are all things that you as family members need to take into consideration. Our decisions do affect a lot of lives here in terms of our residents being exposed to the Omicron variant. I'll stop that. So I have mentioned that social day absences are expanded to all residents regardless of their vaccine status. So targeting March 14th, which I'm only going to talk very briefly about because I think probably by then we may need another meeting. And there's a lot of information that we need to deal with for February 7th and for February 21st. So not wanting to get too ahead of ourselves, I will just mention what we have been told, and then we can go into more detail at a later time. So what will happen is that children under the age of 5 who are not vaccinated will be allowed to visit the home. The number of visitors that the residents can receive will increase to 4. And the social overnight absences for all residents regardless of their vaccination status. So remembering that as of February 21st, only residents who have 3 or 4 COVID vaccines would be allowed to go out on an overnight visit. As of March 14th, they're lifting that and saying anybody, regardless of their vaccination status, we're talking about our residents here, are allowed to go out on an overnight stay. So as I mentioned, there has been changes to the Ministry of Health guidance. They're updating what the confirmed outbreak definition means, and there is an algorithm for us for managing contacts and long-term care homes. And so what they have done is they have designated 2 types within the algorithm, one being low-risk contact and the other being high-risk contact. So we, when residents are either coming back in, would follow the algorithm in terms of was the resident in contact with a positive case when, say, they were out on day or overnight absence during their period of communicability? And then if the answer is no, there's no further action. If the answer is yes, it moves down the algorithm to did the resident receive direct care? So maybe talking about staff or family members. And then it continues down until you get to, is the resident vaccinated and has a booster and hasn't had direct care? They may be put into the treat as low risk, monitoring residents for symptoms, PCR test on day 5, as opposed to somebody who might be high risk. And then we have to implement droplet contact precautions and isolate for 5 days, which then could lead us to enhanced precautions or into outbreak. And again, their definition of outbreak is basically the same: 2 residents, 1 resident, 1 staff. But then we're also looking at, are the staff acquiring COVID from the home, or are they acquiring it in the community? If it ends up being, as has been sort of in the past, that it's mostly staff, and it's not the residents, i.e. there are no residents that have COVID-19, but there are a couple of staff and they're off, then we don't have to go into outbreak, because we then keep two lists. One list with staff who acquired COVID in the community, and one list of staff who would have acquired it at work. So then they look at they call it epi because it's much easier to say than the epidemiology of where the COVID case is coming from. So if, for example, you were told that your loved one had COVID, then you could go into discussion with Marnie as to how they got it, how we're treating it, and then if we went into outbreak, we would be giving you more information. But we're really hoping that, you know, we can stop it at the door, and with the help of family members, that could be the case. So I think, unless there are questions, as I said, these changes are aimed at trying to balance the risk of COVID infection with the overall resident health and well-being. And I really feel we're at that point where we really need to look at the residents' health and well-being. Being confined to their rooms is not a healthy way for them to be living. The staff do continue to wear full PPE, even with CC1 being opened, and we're still waiting to hear for CC2. And one of the reasons, and we're having them wear N95 masks, is one of the reasons is we're trying to protect the staff from spreading it to the residents. It's not the other way around, it's staff to residents. We were supposed to do booster shots today, but we were contacted by public health, and they have offered to come in and do the vaccine clinic here in the home, which is better in terms of staffing for us. So that will happen on Valentine's Day, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. Here's your booster and here's a chocolate. So we'll be doing that next Wednesday. And I think that's about all I have to share with you at this moment. I will send you a snapshot of the absences and social gatherings that the ministry has put together. I will also send you a copy of the safety measures for absences that we would be giving to the residents and the families, along with a copy of our new visitor policy. I think that's probably all you'll need, because the visitor policy is 40 pages long. So I don't know if there are any questions. Okay. I'm just reading the comments. Just a general comment to say thank you to all the staff for your diligence and care of our loved ones. Andrew Smith, thank you. You're welcome. Ditto from Karen Portwright. Good job. Thanks to staff. I'll let them know. I will tell them that the families are thanking them. Is there any alternative to confining residents to their rooms? Is that a public health decision? That's from Andrew Smith. Yes, that is a decision of public health. That is not a decision we make. And we do have outbreak meetings with public health every day if we're in outbreak. And we do have those discussions around what can we do. And I think public health will be coming forward with some new solutions, because this document that they are now following is the new document as of February 3rd, COVID-19 guidance for long-term care homes for public health units. So this is where the algorithms come into play. So this is where I think they're going to be going, you only have one person, you know, if you can isolate them to the room, and if they're low risk, you know, all of those things are going to be taken into consideration. Whereas before, outbreak was very cut and dry. It's this number of people, and everybody's in the room for 10 days. And they're dropping the 10 days. They're making it less as well. So I think they're really trying hard to, you know, to where we get to the point of, you know, it's like the common cold. And I mean, we do have outbreaks in the home. We have, you know, many years ago, we've had influenza outbreaks and that kind of thing. But I think we're on our way. The light is much brighter than it has been for 2 years. So I hope that answers your question. Patricia Campbell, thank you for all you do, BHR staff, your hard work. You've done such an incredible job. Thank you in this past 2 years. Thank you. Okay, John Johnson, if we take our parent out for a walk around the property, will it require any protocols on return? So I have that answer. Just give me a minute to find it because I talked about it. So an essential absence is going for a walk. But I would say that if you're just walking around the property and you're not meeting anybody, and I might get shot for saying this, that you wouldn't need, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't think you would need to be tested. And I know there's someone out there who has the answer and is probably thinking it really hard to send it to me. Absences, short day. The problem is when I look at this, if I look at short-term day absences that are less or equal to 24 hours in duration, there are 2 types: essential absences, as I mentioned, groceries, pharmacy, and outdoor physical activity. Example, I walk, and then I go to they may just need to have a rapid antigen test. I'm going to say I don't really have the answer because there's so many pages to this. I'll let you know exactly what it is. I would think it wouldn't be necessary, but I could be wrong, and they may need to have they don't. The one thing I can tell you is nobody's going into isolation. It's just a matter of whether or not they need a testing. So let me see. What does this say?
It's a follow-up to that question.
Let me just, sorry. Is the courtyard available to spend time in? It is the middle of winter, so it's pretty much locked up. It would depend on the weather as to whether we would allow that. And then, although we ensure that the walkways are cleared, I would be concerned for ice and slipping and falling. You may be able to take them out the front, but then again, it's the same kind of issue of, the residents need some fresh air. So let me get back to you on that one too. How we could, we can't stop you from coming and taking them out for a walk, but we're just concerned about weather and safety, which I'm sure you would be too. So I'm not sure if that answers that question or not. It's been some lovely days where somebody all bundled up would have probably really enjoyed a little bit of fresh air. So if that's all they're doing, I can't imagine that we would need to test them. The ministry's rules don't always make sense, so that's why I say this with caution, but I will check and get you the right answer. Thank you. I can appreciate your concerns. And part of my concerns are that we have to follow what the ministry dictates or the public health dictates to us. So we may go, this doesn't make sense, but we still have to do it, unfortunately. So, There seems to be no more questions this time. Oh, I do have something. Where to go? I have somebody dropped a gold earring. I don't know if you can see it really well. In the front by the screening table. So we were just wondering if it belonged to a family member. If you can let me know, we'll check with our staff, but I don't think our staff really wear earrings because it's a hazard for them. So we're thinking it must be somebody who visited. So that's what it looks like. You can let us know. So I don't have anything more to share with you at this time. I will try to have a meeting before March 14, but then who knows what could happen between now and then.
Yeah, you're caught up.
Caught up. So if there's nothing more, I will say have a good evening. Again, thank you for joining. If you have any questions or any concerns, please send them to me. Like I said, there's been a couple of questions that I don't want to give a definite answer on, but I will when I send out my email to you tomorrow. So thank you and stay safe.